Welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at Endeavor Age of Sail. This is a 2 to 5 player area control card drafting exploration game where you take the role of your own empire during the Age of Sail, which is from years 1571 to 1862. You'll be increasing attributes, gathering resources, constructing buildings, controlling trade routes, and opening up new regions for colonization and commerce, trying to become the most successful empire at the end of the Age of Sail. How do you become the most successful empire? By having the most glory at the end of the 7th round. Now that we know what the winning condition is, let's take a look at the components, setup, and how a round and turn work in Endeavor Age of Sail. Now let's take a look at the components for Endeavor Age of Sail. We're going to start with the main game board, which has two sides, Side A and Side B. Side A is for 2 players, 3 players, and a high conflict 4-player game, whereas Side B is for a lower conflict 4-player game and a 5-player game. Next we have your player or empire mats. Then we have the building tiles, which are in the tray, and everyone will start with a starting building tile. We have trade tokens. The brown trade tokens will be your attributes, so one of the 4 attributes, and then the blue tokens will be your action tokens. Now let's look at the cards. There are Govenor cards that have stripes on them. And then there are asset cards that have numbers in the bottom right corner. You have a Crown First Player marker, a card glossary, track extensions, a score pad. Now for the player components. You have the starting building tile that we mentioned earlier, and then you have 35 population discs, and you have 4 track tokens, or cubes. Now we're going to take a look at the advanced components. This is for the mini expansion and the exploits that we will discuss at the end of this video if you wanted to add complexity to your game. It is suggested that you familiarize yourself with the base game before you throw the charter companies or exploits into the game. The charter companies have 6 building tiles of the different locations. And then the exploits components are your exploit tiles, 6 keys, player or empire shields in each of the colors, cannons, the pirate ship, blockades, fortifications, missionaries, share tokens, and then finally, galleon freedom and transit tokens. Now let's take a look at the setup for Endeavor Age of Sail. We're going to be setting this up for a 3-player game, and setup for Endeavor Age of Sail takes 8 steps. Step number 1 is to set up the main game board. So you're going to choose the side that fits your game and place it in the middle. So since we're setting this up for a 3-player game, we are going to choose side A of the main game board. If you wanted a low conflict 4-player game or a 5-player game, you would use side B. Step number 2 is to place the trade tokens. You are going to randomly place the trade tokens on the circles on the main game board. Step number 3 is to set up and place the asset cards. So you're going to separate the cards by region and stack in order from 1 to 5 face up, or if it's the Europe or slavery stack, it's going to be from 0 to 5, and then you'll stack them on their spots. Step number 4 is to place the Govenor cards. You are going to turn them to their horizontal side, where all of the symbols are laid out horizontally, and slide it under the board with the symbols visible in their region. Step 5 is to set up and prepare your building tray. This is where you place the level 1 through 5 buildings in the tray, And for level 5 buildings, you shuffle the level 5 buildings and place 3 in the far right column face up. Step number 6 is the Empire or Player setup, where you get an Empire or Player mat, 35 discs, 4 attribute tokens or cubes. You will place the 4 attributes on the zeros for each of their tracks. Step number 7 is to choose a starting player randomly and give them the crown. And then lastly, step number 8, you're going to choose the starting building for your empire. You're given one start building tile that has the red in the top left corner. And if it's your first time playing, they do suggest you use the colonial house, but you get to choose between the colonial house and the merchant dock. Once you've made your choice, you'll slide it into your starting building slot on your empire or player mat, and then you're going to place one of your discs in the circle. Now let's take a look at how a round and turn work in Endeavor Age of Sail. There are 7 rounds to each game, and in each round there are 5 phases. The construction phase, the growth phase, the salary phase, the action phase, and the discard phase. Phase number 1 is the construction phase. In turn order, you're going to choose one building from the supply to build in your empire. The level of building you can build must be less than or equal to your build level on the industry track. So at the beginning of the game, you can build level 1 buildings. If the building has any attributes in the bottom left, you can increase those attribute tracks. During this phase, you can construct a duplicate building that you've already built in your empire. Phase 2 is the growth phase. Based on your culture track, you are going to gain population discs indicated by the growth level. So, at the beginning of the game, you're going to gain 2 population discs. You're going to move the discs from your supply to your harbor. At this time, I do want to point out that if you run out of discs from your supply, you don't add any more and you forfeit those discs you would gain. Phase number 3 is the salary phase. Based on your wealth track, you will have a salary level that will let you move discs at buildings back to your harbor, freeing up the building and disc to be used this round. So at the beginning of the game, you have a salary level of 1, meaning you can move 1 of your population discs back to your harbor if they were on a building. When you are doing this, you get to choose which discs that you take from your buildings back to your harbor. Phase 4 is the action phase. In turn order, each player performs one action at a time until all players have passed. Actions are either taken by activating a building or spending a blue action token. If you get an attribute token through an action, increase your track and place the token next to the track. If you receive an action token, place it in your harbor. To activate a building, you have to take one of your population discs and place it on the building in the activation circle. Then by placing the disc in the activation circle on the building, you activate the action in the bottom right corner of the building tile. To use an action token, you simply discard the action token from the game and then perform the action. If you see a line, then that means or, so you can perform either of those 2 actions. If you see a plus, you would then perform one or both of those actions. There are 5 types of actions you can take during the game. The first type of action is the ship action, where you move a disc from your harbor to either a shipping track, which are around the edges of the board in the different regions, to a fleet space, which are the ship spaces, or an open sea zone, which is the big circles in each of the regions. When players have claimed all of the spots on a shipping track, then that region becomes open. When a region becomes open, the player with the most discs in the shipping track will then gain the Governor card for that region and the attributes that come with it. You would take the card, flip it over, and place it on your free Governor space, or if that's taken up, you can place it next to your board. The second type of action is the Occupy action, or the flag. This is where you move a population disk from your harbor to an unoccupied city in an open region on the game board. When you do that, you will take the token that was in that location. If this completes or continues a link, take the linking token as well. The third type of action is the attack action, or the cannon. This is where you're going to discard a disk back to your supply, and then choose a city or fleet of your opponents to attack. So you would pull off their disk from that particular place. They would then take that disk and put it back into their supply. And then you would take another disk from your harbor and place it in that location. You are only allowed to attack cities or fleets in open regions. The fourth type of action is the payment or money action. This is where you'll move a disk from a building of your choice back to your harbor. Special buildings can't be paid during this phase. And then finally, the fifth type of action is the draw action, or the crate. This is where you take the top asset card from the card stack of your choice and add it to a slot on your empire or player map. When you do this, you will gain the attributes on that card. You have to have a presence in the region equal to the draw number, or the number in the bottom right corner of the card. When you're doing the draw action, regions do not have to be open. You can hold any amount of asset cards, but will discard down to your limit in phase 5. Phase number 5 is the discard phase. Based on your influence track, you have a hand limit that you must follow. So in this case, at the very beginning of the game, you can have one card in your slot, as well as you can have one slavery card. When you gain a Governor card, you can place it in your free Governor slot. This does not count toward your hand limit, but you don't necessarily have to put it there. You could put it in a regular card slot. If you do that, it would count towards your hand limit. If the free Governor slot is empty at the end of the game, you do get 3 glory for it being empty. When you discard a slavery card or slavery is abolished during the game, you flip over that card and lose glory in the final scoring for each one of those cards. Any asset card that is discarded goes next to the Europe section of the game board and can be taken by a draw action with influence in Europe equal to that number. That brings us to the end of the round. At the end of the round, you are going to move the start player to the left, and then you will continue to the next round. Rounds will continue on until you reach the end of round number 7. At the end of round number 7, you're going to go to the final scoring. Final scoring takes 5 steps that are outlined on your score sheet. The step number 1 is the attribute track. You're going to slide your attribute tokens backwards until you reach a spot on the track that has a symbol. So if you were at 9, you would slide down to 7. And then you would add all of your attribute track numbers together and place the number next to the attributes on the score sheet. The second step is the cities and links. You're going to add all of the glory symbols from all of your cities that you occupy and the links that you occupy on the game board. The third step is the building cards and free Governor slot on your empire or player mat. You're going to add all of the glory symbols together and place it in that section of the score sheet. Step number 4 is the extra population. You're going to gain 1 glory for every 3 discs in your harbor left at the end of the game. And then finally, step number 5 is the slavery subtraction. So you're going to put how many negative points you have based on the number of cards that you have that have been flipped over, and you'll place them on your score sheet. After you've went through the 5 steps of the final scoring, the highest total number is the most successful empire and wins Endeavor Age of Sail. Now let's take a look at the 2 extra, more advanced additions that you can make to Endeavor Age of Sail. We're going to start with the mini expansion Gharter Companies. These are the 6 building tokens that have the different regions on each token. What you would do is you would place each of the building tokens next to their specific region. Then during the game, During the construction phase, if you have a presence of 6 or more in one of those particular regions, you could build that particular building instead. You are only allowed to build one of these charter company buildings during the game. Now let's take a look at the exploits. You are going to shuffle the exploits together and then draw 3 to use in your game. You're then going to place them together next to the game board. Then you will check and see if any extra steps take place by the gray section on the exploit, or if they need any special components that are in the brown boxes on your exploit. So you're going to need 6 cannons for the stockpiles exploit. Then you're going to take a key and place it in the region of the shields on the exploits. Then you're going to place a key next to the region for each crest that is on your exploits. So you're going to be placing 6 keys. And then finally, you're going to place your player or empire shields next to each player to use when exploits are activated. An exploit is activated when both regions on the exploit are open. When a region becomes open that has a key, you are going to take that key and place it on the exploit. If both of those keys are on the exploit, it becomes activated. When an exploit is activated, if a player has presence in both regions, they can put a shield on the exploit. Players with shields on the exploit are now able to use the actions depicted on the exploit to perform instead of their original purpose. Exploits have game end results if that player has a shield on the exploit. Exploits are a great way to add complexity and more depth to your game of Endeavor.